What is this video about again? Hey survivors, it's your favorite Undead Boy Sunday, here to help you learn, or to manipulate you into joining the undead, who knows? Today we're going to lightly cover memory and a few ways you can improve it. Now memory, which is a subject primarily dealt with by cognitive psychology, is a very large subject. So in the future, I'd love to make some videos that go much deeper into some of the specific aspects of it. I think that while things such as different types of amnesia may not be knowledge you can use every day, it's extremely interesting. Hell, I didn't even know there were other types until I decided to take some of my first psych courses. So if that's something you'd like to see in the future, please leave it in the comments down below. But for this one, I'm just going to give you some things that you yourself can put into practice. Let's bite into it, starting with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is to chop your study session up into small pieces rather than doing one large chunk. Why, you may ask? That's thanks to the serial position effect, which itself is the result of the combination between the primacy effect and the recency effect. A simple explanation of the effect would be that we remember things in a valley style. Much like my long nights of studying, we remember the stuff best at the beginning of an event and at the end of the event. Because of this, memorization will slowly decrease the longer the session. So to increase the amount of memorized information, or the amount of these primacy and recency effects, we simply need to break that one large session into many smaller sessions. So instead of studying all night, try to split it up into a few days. Or at least take 30-minute breaks from time to time. Tip number 2 should be an obvious one, but from the amount of people, including myself, who disregard it, I feel like it needs to be stated. Take care of yourself. Get plenty of sleep, eat healthy, exercise, don't abuse drugs. You can't ask your brain to function at its highest capacity when you hinder it with a poor lifestyle. It should go without saying, but it's far too common for people, including myself, to stay up for days at a time, playing games or drinking, and then go into school the next day and be like, why is this test so hard? I read the whole chapter. You know why. You stayed up all night doing fireball and eating cold pizza. Sorry, I lost my composure there for a second. Anyway, moving on to tip number 3. Tip number 3 is to chew gum while studying information and when needing to recall that information. Chewing gum is known to have a myriad of effects that can benefit your study. It can increase blood flow to the brain, give your brain the sugars it needs, and it can even lower cortisol levels, which, if you didn't know, is the stress chemical. This is fine. Primarily, however, chewing it both during study and during the recollection can assist in memory association. Our brain associates the flavor and action to these memories we've encoded, thus making it easier for the brain to retrieve them later. Which leads us into tip number 4. One of the best ways to put information into memory is to associate it to knowledge and schemas we already know. This is the concept being applied when we use things like acronyms, or songs to learn new information. Things such as PEMDAS, the alphabet, and even the Columbus rhyme. An example would be remembering the colors blue, green, and purple. While your first thought may be to try the rehearsal technique, which is good for prolonging short-term memory but isn't as effective at conversion from short to long-term, you would likely be better off associating them with something like the cold colors of the spectrum, or a popular internet personality. Though from my personal experience, there's one use of this technique that's far superior to any other. This was taught to me by one of the greatest men I've ever had the luxury to study under, Dr. Richard Wedemeyer, which will be tip number 5. Tip number 5 is same environment study. He suggested that we should study in the same place we plan to recall, thus creating as much association as possible. If you can't study in the environment you're recalling in, then find a similar one, or attempt to recreate it. For example, if you can't study in a classroom, study in the school library. If you can't study in the school library, find another library and study there. And I found that this not only improves my test scores, but also drastically helps with my test anxiety. I feel as though the setting loses its anxiety-provoking influence through habituation. Though that's just me, and I have no science to back that claim. Anyway, those are some of the most useful tips I've come across in my studies. And while they work well on their own, try to apply them all together, and you'll likely see a dramatic result in your memorization skills. And that's your brain for food. I mean food for your brain. Now I want to ask you, survivors, did you find any of these interesting? Which technique are you going to try first? Leave it in the comments down below. Also, like, subscribe, and hit that dead ringer so you can join me in the next video where I talk about the art of deception and psychology surrounding lies. Hope to see you then. Remember, be safe, or you may end up like me.